The story of insulin's discovery has become one of the most enduring in the history of medicine. It has been told many times over, most comprehensively by Michael Bliss in his classic work, The Discovery of Insulin, but a century later it remains just as gripping. With a rags-to-riches character arc, high drama, and a heroic conclusion, it feels almost as if it has been lifted directly from a Hollywood script. As ever, however, the simple narrative hides a far more interesting, if murky, tale, and one that invites us to ask serious questions about the way we understand the process of research and innovation in medicine. Frederick Banting, so it goes, made for an unlikely protagonist. Born into a relatively prosperous farming family in the countryside around Alliston, Ontario, he was not a particularly academic child and only barely managed to graduate from high school. In 1910, he began to study arts at the University of Toronto, but promptly dropped out after failing some of his first-year examinations. He then changed direction completely, sought readmittance, and started a medical degree in 1912. Banting was better at medicine than he had been at the arts, but he was never a particularly remarkable student. His final year was compressed into only a few months due to the heavy demand for medics on the battlefields of the First World War, and after his graduation in late 1916, he, like most of his cohort, went off to Europe to fight. He took well to army life, and even earned a military cross for bravery under fire, though not without being wounded by shrapnel. After some time spent recuperating in Britain, he returned to civilian life in Canada in 1919. After the war, Banting struggled to find work. Following a brief stint as a surgical resident at Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children, where, despite his best efforts, he was unable to secure a permanent position, he decided to try his hand at private practice. In the summer of 1920, he opened a modest office in London, Ontario. The fledgling business was, however, a complete failure. Increasingly indebted and professionally embarrassed, he took on a part-time job as a demonstrator at the University of Western Ontario, known colloquially simply as Western. Years later, in a 1929 lecture, Banting tried to put a positive spin on this period of his life. He was, he suggested, determined to become a Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, and working at Western meant that he had easy access to the resources he needed to prepare for the necessary examinations. This was not an unreasonable goal for a man of his age and experience, but he also desperately needed the cash. Throughout the summer and autumn, he was making only around $50 per month, the equivalent of just over 600 Canadian dollars today. When the costs of running his practice were taken into account, there was no hiding the fact that he was hemorrhaging money.